I'm Rodain.
I'm Dorianne.
I'm Danny.
I'm Marc.
And together we are
QCF
Design. Dun, 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 dun. So today we are talking about Resolve.
No, that's resolution.
Resolution.
Yeah.
You guys had that planned, didn't you?
No. Desktop Dungeons is known to be a little bit on the smaller side compared to some other games out there. People do regularly love to remind us of this.
Yeah.
So we thought that it would be worth having a podcast dedicated to.
Well, also we've
Why?
been spending a lot of time on dealing with different resolution issues and
Yeah.
porting the game to different systems and
We
what
have
that
a lot
means.
to complain about.
So,
Yeah.
Rodain, what resolution is Desktop Dungeons running at?
The current one is 800 by 600, which is this massive step up from the original alpha, which was a mere 640 by 480.
No, it wasn't.
Well, no, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
Oh no, you're
No,
right.
it
It was
wasn't.
560 by 400.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
The fuck?
Yeah,
Why?
I did.
Why? Doesn't Present You hate past you for doing that?
No, present me is still very agnostic. You gotta understand that unless I'm deliberately told to do so, I don't even run the editor in proper resolution. I am very agnostic about resolution, and whenever I create a new game prototype, I literally go, what sort of game do I need? And then I will trim the edges of my game space to accommodate that resolution. I suppose because I've always disliked the idea of resolution informing, game design and layout and experience and things like that. Although with the work we did on the DD beta onward, I think that I started to adopt a slightly more realistic view of that and realize that actually resolution on its own is an important decision to make early on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 400 is from the whole 20 by 20 pixel
Yeah.
sprite thing.
It was the neatest thing, and then the 560 pixels width, I remember now because I didn't go for the standard thing. This 560 pixels was just 400 wide, and then some spare. Like, that was the only design it was. I just kind of like, I think
it wasn't even plus this much for this element. It was just I need a bar
Well,
here.
I think if you go with like a 4:3 resolution on 400 high, then you end up with like something. It's a very strange resolution size.
It is very strange. I mean, look, the thing is, I didn't even bother keeping it 4:3. I just went chopped 80 pixels off the bottom and then just 80 off the sides, so paying absolutely no regard to like proper scaling and stuff like that. I just kind of said, well, I'll need about 160 pixels. I've picked a font that will fit a reasonable amount of wording in there, so that should be enough space for my interface. Done. That part of the game's design idea sorted. I'm happy now.
Yeah, the play area
I
is
think
20 by
Present Me hates
20.
past you.
Well, but I do remember that we still had the idea that, oh, you know what, we're going to go 800 by 600 because it very neatly fits 30 tiles by 30 tiles plus...
20 tiles by 20 tiles.
Oh, 20 tiles, yeah.
By
Sorry.
30 pixels.
Yeah.
And of course, we didn't have an artist at that time to tell us, hell
No, don't do it. Go bigger and make it smaller later.
There were a couple other things to consider as well. One, we wanted it to be pixel art, and so focusing on the tiles being 30 by 30 felt like this huge, there's so much more space. So 30 by 30 tiles are good, and a lot of people were used to the idea of making 32 by 32 art. So we were trying to stick within like a kind of like a divides by 2. And I remember the decision was also that we wanted to put it in the web. So you wanted to have something that would be in a web browser that would work okay. And we were also aiming for like kind of more of a casual game feel, because that's where the game felt like it was going. So 800 by 600 for a whole bunch of old computers is also not like terrifying. And the choice to stick with 4.3 was motivated by the idea of tablets and stuff coming out and being 4.3. Like, we didn't know very much about iPads and stuff, but we knew they were going to be 4.3. It felt more logical to do that than to focus on the idea of trying to make a game that was going to natively require you to be widescreen on a device where we were then going to be like sacrificing large chunks of the real estate.
It's quite interesting to think what our mindset must have been back then, because I mean, we're talking like back in 2010 when the alpha first came into existence. What were tablets?
We didn't have tablets yet.
No.
I don't think any of us had seen an iPad in real life.
I'm pretty sure that even overseas there was still
it was
a bit of
an
an
idea.
We started pitching up, I think. But
well, even screens at that point were still, like, the big screens were still 4x3.
yeah, I mean, I was still developing on a 4x3 screen until, like, what, a couple of weeks ago when I got a new one.
Thanks to money from DD now.
Yeah. So the making it 4:3, a lot of people are like, that's so weird, why did you do that? But I remember when I was redesigning the interface for the beta, just going, oh, I have so much more room now. Because, like, the 400 pixels by 160 pixels is not a lot of room to put a lot of information in, because DD needs tons of info on the screen.
Just the text. Just how do you handle a font in 160 pixels across? That's not a column. That's not a column you can read in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we pretty much had to have the tab system for information and inventory and
Yeah, well, that
shop
made a lot of
plans and
difference.
stuff. It really did.
Like, that also felt like I was gaining so much space to design stuff in. But, yeah, so that's where the resolution came from. I guess a lot of people would probably, like, tell me that I'm dumb for going for 800 by 600, you know, as opposed to 1024 by 768, because that's iPad resolution.
Yeah.
But we didn't know that at the time.
No.
And also, 768 means what size sprites are you working on? Like, 30 by 30 is already weird.
I mean, our problem really is the fact that we wanted to keep everything at this pixel level. You know, we wanted it to be pixel art. We didn't want to make 3D models and then just have them display at whatever resolution that the player is looking at.
But I mean, like, early on there, you know, it really was sort of dictated by programmers, and we had our one artist who was overseas, you know, like,
Yeah.
to weigh in there. I do sometimes wonder what would have happened if we had Dorianne from the beginning.
I'd like to think that if you had me from the start, I would have insisted on going like 4 times the size and then scaling downwards rather than trying to upscale later. But I don't know if I would have held my ground strong enough against the 3 programmers early on.
Well, I would have been like, that makes it a Painterly style. Like, that's a very different style of game.
When I came in, it was already a Painterly style with painted pixels, and that was a nightmare.
You came in painting the kingdom, though.
Yeah. Well, no, I started on tile sets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then
the kingdom. And the kingdom was a nightmare. The tile sets were okay. I started finding a bit of a groove there, but...
Well, you did some cool things with the tile sets. After I gave you the tool, you were like, hey!
Yeah. Once I could see what I was doing,
It made
all the
magic.
difference.
So trying to work at that sort of resolution in a 3D tool, which is Unity, gets very strange when you're trying to display exact pixels, because 3D doesn't like displaying exact pixels. It likes giving you things at weird angles, and, you know, you got your textures on your models, and you don't always see them.
Yeah, things like in a 3D
Straight
game,
up.
if something is directly perpendicular to the camera, that's a weird occurrence.
Yeah, exactly. And so we had this problem also where we wanted to display this text at, you know, these very, very pixel perfect resolutions, and getting the text to do that was like a huge hassle.
it was a nightmare.
Yeah, it really was. We had to change the sizes of text, choose what sort of font we were using, and, you know, we couldn't do the standard thing where because we don't have like a UI, like a first-person shooter where it's all displayed before the things in the 3D space.
Oh yeah.
We want to be able to put text behind things in our scene. So all of the text is textures on little quads.
But that was a conscious decision, though. I mean, we looked at the UI text, and we read on the Unity forums how people were handling UI text, and we knew 2 things from that. 1, it was really, really slow, and 2, it was really difficult to deal with scaling and resolution changes. Like, by the time we were really focusing on text, we were focusing on designing the interface with the text in the Unity version, we knew that we were going to probably have to upscale. And we knew that when you tried to full screen the game, the text, the UI text in Unity, because it's drawn as a separate process after the fact via like a special ortho camera, that text is not actually displayed at that text is rendered at the resolution that your screen is displaying at, as opposed to the resolution that your game is being calculated at.
So as you increase your resolution, the text gets smaller.
Yeah.
And that was not going to work for the amount of very, very necessary information we had in our interface.
Yeah. But then you find out that aligning those quads is a problem. That's where...
Yeah, because if they're sitting at...
Could I just add this? Or adding a drop shadow, or or outlining, or changing the color, or...
The changing the color was pretty magic, actually, on the text. Like, I'm pretty sure Marc could talk about how he managed to pull that off for quite a while.
That
And
may
how
be
he
its-
managed to build drop shadows.
That may end up being its own podcast series.
We did look into making that like specifically its own render to texture thing though. Like I remember.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had, even once we cracked the problem, we still had for months, there were these little flickers of problems with text that we had to sort of pat
I
down.
remember text on some of the toast panels, as we call them, as they slide upwards.
Oh, yeah.
They used to sort of do this weird crawl as they would move into half pixel boundaries, and lines would disappear for a bit and then reappear because they're sitting at sub-pixel distances because of the way that movement works in 3D.
Yeah.
It looks like a caterpillar crawling across the screen.
Yeah, and like some lines or bits of text lines like Y pixels would just be gone.
Yeah, just missing.
Also, missing the horizontal stroke off of an E is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what problems? I mean, we're trying to obviously go onto pads and stuff, and we're running into the same problems we did back when we first went to full screen.
Yeah, so the focus on trying to make the game go full screen and also be able to play the game at higher resolutions was something that first appeared in the Game Maker Alpha, and running the game at double res was like a life-changing thing for so many people. I remember that when we added that with that release, so many new people picked up the game. So just being able to like, F4 was full screen and F2 was double size. But then when we wanted to make the full game, the Unity version of the game full screen, we had a whole bunch of problems with that in the beginning. Like at first, when you're just using standard point filtering, which is like nearest neighbor if you're into Photoshop, that looked so weird depending on the scaling idiosyncrasies of the screen versus the resolution that the game was running at. So 800 by 600 on like a 1024 by 768 screen, you end up with a thing happening where there are certain lines on the screen that are repeated. And so there's normal, and then a repeated line, and then a repeated line. So it looks like the entire thing is sort of like not stretching, but is being viewed through a very weird set of glasses.
It starts to look kind of cross-hatched.
Yeah. And you get the same thing happening like vertically and horizontally. But if you're viewing it at like on a screen that is like, say, like a 1080 screen or whatever, you have the other problem. And so you end up with like text being very strange. Basically it just looks like mutant and stuff. So there's...
It makes the individual glyphs of the text look like they're having a seizure.
Yeah.
And they were like frozen in frame, like some lines are thicker and others are
It looks like they come from hell, is what you're trying to say.
Mid-seizure.
It looks like they come from hell.
No
pretty
reason to
horrible.
be mean.
So we're sitting there and like, okay, what can we do to this? So we figured out that we could render the entire screen to an off-screen texture that was 800 by 600, and then it would be pixel perfect. And I can talk about the half-pixel boundary issue that we were dealing with, which is what caused a lot of the alignments with text later. So if people want to ask me about that, that's fine.
All I know it as is the thing that creates weird pink lines in our game.
There are no pink lines. I got rid of all the pink.
We're like, okay, cool. We're rendering this thing to an 800 by 600 screen buffer, and then we'll draw that as its own quad. And if we bilinearly filter that, it should look fine. And it does actually look fine. When we take into account the half-pixel thing messing with how the bilinear filtering was working. Yeah. So we've just released an update that crisps the game up a lot. And
We
looks quite
potentially will be just having released an update.
nice. Oh god, podcast time. That's confusing. So trying to figure out when an individual pixel is crossing two texels and then only sample those texels and stuff like that, and like that is a relatively annoyingly difficult mathematical problem. So one day I'll get to that. We've got some like approximation stuff in there that might look better at certain resolutions. But what we're doing is we're giving people the chance to actually just choose which way they want to handle it. So they'll be able to select in the game bilinear filtering or experimental shader or just normal point filtering.
So I'm going to say bye to you guys for now, since you three are heading off to GDC and I'm holding the fort back in Cape Town. If we're feeling extra generous and you're extra lucky, you might hear our next podcast from the GDC.
Yeah, that could be cool.
We can try it.
So, cheerios for now, and we'll catch you the next time we put a video in your face. Bye!
Bye.
Bye.
So we've changed our seating order, so let's start anti-clockwise again.
Yeah, anti-clockwise. Wait, start anti-clockwise. No, that's a direction. Not a starting point.
I'm pointing.
Oh, crap. The mic didn't pick up the pointing.
We need to fix that.